I don't think there's.
Vernal equinox.
There's another one in Pacifica.
Super moon.
Well, I don't know where
There's
they're
only
based,
one.
but they
On
use
Worm Day.
On a warm day.
Worm.
Warm day?
It's the day, in the East Coast, yes.
What is warm day?
It's a day when all the worms are too frozen to come out of the ground, hopefully.
water drawn from granite aquifers in Montero.
I've never heard that one.
It's the worm moon.
The worm moon, yes, it was a super moon,
It's just
super
falling
worm
out so the
moon.
worms can come out.
Catherine, Rick, you guys are not interested in the CSDA position? There's an election coming up, past,
Not at the state level, not now.
No,
okay, because
I found out who won the Aqua thing. Somebody named Jack from North First County. Joshua said at the meeting, oh, and we'd like to tell everybody that Jack won the nomination for Region 5. And I'm saying, oh, that's not so very
interesting.
San Carlo.
no, we've got
That is not from these guys.
mere moments.
Oh, San Carlos, okay.
You're passing notes, Charlie?
Yes. Don't tell people.
Yeah.
I wonder it's important.
Rain, Japanese rain, Wednesday.
How do you know it's Wednesday?
It's a rain Wednesday.
So I didn't touch my collection today. That's it on the board for 4-week murder.
I missed mine a month ago. I don't know what it was. I didn't have to go. I called in the night before and
No, they took in 4 groups today, 86 people each group. And they're bringing in 2 more tomorrow. This is going to be a thing.
Aww.
You gotta have something to get you through the meeting. You gotta lay in provisions.
That's cool.
Woo-hoo, let's call
This is
this
how you know
meeting
you're getting
to
good at
order.
Meetings, when you remember to bring the snacks.
Let's call this meeting to, oh, well, let's not call the meeting to order until we're done handing out the cookies. Is anybody taking a cookie? I hear none. Okay. We will call this meeting to order, Montero Water and Sanitary District at 7:30 PM, Thursday, March 21st, 2019. And roll call, please.
Director Boyd,
Here.
Director Loman,
here.
Director Sager Carter,
Present.
Director Harvey,
Here.
Director Marshall.
Here.
And let me go here. President's statement. I was going to give folks a long, detailed list of all the things that are happening at the state level that our legislators would like to pass on to special districts and cities as a way of changing things. And of course, the biggest change will be in the rates that people pay for sewer and water.
For Jim.
And rather than go into detail, I will tell you there's an interesting one on the agenda later, and we will keep you posted as things get closer and letters from the public will make more of a difference. But just be assured that your state representatives need to hear from you about keeping costs down. Otherwise, they don't care. And then they put it on us, and then you get mad at us, but really the causes happened in Sacramento years in advance. And so keep a heads up.
Catherine, just real quick on that. At the LAFCO meetings, at the end of the packet, they don't go into every detail, but they list from the Cal LAFCO Legislative Committee all the relevant laws that are currently churning for special districts. I could chop those 4 or 5 pages off and distribute them to the board if that's interesting.
We get notes from the Special District Association and the Association of Sewer Agencies and the Water Agencies. So I think
Okay.
rather than have more paper floating around, we could talk about things that seem particularly relevant for here, if you'd like, under director's reports.
Sure, because there were 2 that LAFCO is encouraging, or they voted to support these and send information up to the state. I have to see what the details are.
Yeah, because it might not be good for
Yeah,
us.
it might not be good for us. The odds are always it's worse than it is better.
That's it. Okay, oral comments. I see no slips in front of me. Anyone in the audience want to fill out a slip and say anything? Seeing no one rushing to the microphone, we will move on to public hearing. There is no public hearing, and that leads us to consent agenda, which is approve the minutes for February 7, 2019, approve the financial statements for January 2019, approve warrants for March 1st, 2019, SAM flow report for January 2019, monthly review of current investment portfolio, connection permit applications received, and monthly water production report for January 2019. Then there's the rain report, the solar energy report, and the monthly public agency retirement service report for December 2018. Do we have any items people want to discuss specifically?
Move for approval of the consent agenda.
Scott moves for approval.
Second.
Rick seconds. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Leading us to old business, review and possible action in consideration of in-house sewer collection services.
Thanks, Catherine. So we heard about this item last at the December 6, 2018 meeting. And we actually walked away with directions from the board. In the meantime, Director Marshall raised concerns about a potential conflict of interest for our sewer engineer, as well as for the general manager. And that is when legal counsel advised staff to halt any work on the item until the potential conflict has been addressed. So we have this now confirmation that staff can work on this, that there is no conflict of interest for the sewer engineer as well as the general manager on this. So this is for board information only. We will be able to pick the assessment up now and continue work on this. Again, only informationary item.
Can we, even though that's settled, can you hear me, Dave?
I don't know if you had an opportunity to read the email I sent out this afternoon on the subject.
Oh, I wasn't. Go ahead, Dave. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, the concern really relates to, I think, management concerns, as to say how much time is spent on a particular item. Ultimately, that's under the control of the board. It doesn't amount to a legal conflict of interest. It's a management issue, which, as I say, is ultimately under the control of the board. So, to the extent there's a financial interest, sure, but it's a compensatory interest. Yeah. I appreciate the question. That was an excellent question.
Thanks.
My question, Dave, was can we go to the item? Can we discuss the item itself? That's the legal issue. Can we go on and briefly discuss the item itself of collections from the
Is the manager prepared to discuss the item?
Well, sure. Again, we're in the status of the December 6th meeting, more or less, where we brought the item to the board. We went through first an assessment of the sewer engineer. We then went through an assessment of our financial advisor, Bartle Wells, who strongly recommended, who sees that there is a financial advantage for the district, clearly, and strongly recommends further assessment of this. We were tasked with the preparation of requests for proposal for interim services to initiate a transition. So ultimately to establish a plan how the transition could work and what services would need to be purchased from a vendor, from an outside vendor for this case, and how this transition is essentially timed also. So we're going to work on this. Jim, do you have some specific questions on this?
I do, Kathy. This was kind of talked about at SAM during the budget discussion. To make the budgets move forward, the budget is moving forward with current processes.
Correct. So
No, just the budget part,
I've let
that's
Sam know that we're basically not looking at any change to the contract at this time, to the existing contract, so that the budget can be prepared accordingly. And I understand that the budget is actually going to the SAM board on the 25th, next Monday.
The collections, yes.
Collections, we're talking about.
But in addition to that, since Half Moon Bay has been kind of waffling, they were specifically asked, well, what are your thoughts now? What are you doing? And they kind of hemmed and hawed and said, well, we really can't state that right now until we go back and talk to our people again. So in my opinion, I'm not in any urgent mood right now to move forward with aggressively searching replacements to the SAM contract until some of the stuff is resolved. We see what Half Moon Bay is doing. I don't see a need. Any quotes we get now aren't going to be good in 6 months to 9 months from now.
So you're saying we should
I would slow
table
down
the
the project.
project?
That's my thoughts. I'll just throw that out.
We're not planning on getting quotes at this time. We were instructed to put a plan and a request for proposals together that could be sent at the time that the board decides.
Hi, Greg.
Go ahead.
Okay, Jim.
So, and I want to caution everybody, this is not an action item tonight.
Right.
That's right.
Okay?
Right. I understand that, but I hear some strong opinions on spending a lot of time on this particular item when we have a lot of different things that we need to be spending time on. So I'd like to get a straw poll of the board.
I at least have a question. I thought that we were going to, I thought we gave direction for Clemens and staff to look at getting a new contract for collections with SAM, and not depend on the old. How old is the contract we have now? I thought we were going to get. Thought we were looking at getting a new contract. Was that not the direction that we gave the previous meetings?
Comments, what was your takeaway about the direction?
So we were supposed to initiate the request for proposal. We were also supposed to converse with SAM about any changes to the contract.
And is there any reason why it's taken 3 months to get to this point without any of those happening?
Yes, it is explained in the staff report. We were advised by council not to pursue any work on this item or present any action for tonight.
Understood for tonight, but how about prior to that time?
Well, we continued working on this. We did some work on it, of course, absolutely, until we were shut down.
So I guess some of the comments, I've actually done some financial analysis along this, and I'm not so confident that what we saw in the meeting in November or December time period actually is showing cost benefit to the district.
May I suggest then for a longer discussion on this, because it is not an action item, that we put this on our next agenda
Yep.
as an item for action?
I would
And-
like to see that, yes.
And we can discuss this then, because since it's for information only, it makes sense to me to
To
have,
kind of where we left it, we asked staff to take some of the notional items and reduce them to some practical terms.
Exactly.
And their work was halted, as you know. So I would like to see that work brought back to us in the form that we asked them to bring it to us. I'd like to see them have the opportunity to do that, because we knew at our last meeting that what we saw last fall was notional and needed to be fleshed out. So before we go picking on the stuff that we already told staff we wanted better, more detailed information on, I'd like to make sure that we have the more recent information properly prepared by staff through, using all the tools that staff has always used to model things for us and bring us proposals so that we can know what we're looking at. I mean, the whole purpose of this, as you might recall, was because of the forcing function of the city doing its thing, withdrawing, it left us asking questions. And I want to make sure that we understand what the options are. So that's what I hope to see when we take up this item at the next meeting, or hopefully at the next meeting, but as soon as we can have that item, I want some good information so we can walk in and for the benefit of our ratepayers, make some decisions about what has utility and efficacy for the people of this district.
I think that's good.
Wait, Scott, I don't understand.
I'm just saying, I want them to
You're
finish
saying-
their work.
You're saying what work are you talking about?
We asked
The-
Clemens and staff
looking at the
to
content.
go get us some information so we'd know, so we'd have an apples to apples comparison, so we could make an informed decision about, if we're going to spend the money one way or the other, which way we're going to spend it. Is it going to be one way, another way, some mix, something new? They've got some work to do to flesh out the numbers on any kind of plan, and we've asked them to do that. I'd like to see them finish that.
You're talking about contract versus us getting our own collections? What comparison are you talking about?
We
I don't understand what you're saying.
not being real certain what's going to happen with collections at SAM because of Half Moon Bay's decision to withdraw, breaking up the team and changing the whole cost equation there. We know that SAM management has been working hard to try to come up with a way to moderate the impact of that decision on Half Moon Bay's part. It sounds like Half Moon Bay is maybe waffling on that. We're never quite sure because of they don't tell us until after the fact on a lot of these things. So, maybe we'll learn something. I hope so. I hope they come back to the team, and if they do, it's going to make it a lot easier to say, let's keep it, we know how to operate as a team. Great. I don't want to get into advocating here. I just want to make sure that what we come back with is, if something happens there that makes it, suppose costs double there. I don't know, but suppose costs double there. Do we have an option besides just paying double? So we've asked staff to tell us what our options are and what they might cost, so that when and if we're faced with a decision, we've got numbers in front of us and a notion of what some choices are. This is about informing us about our choices, and then we got to make a decision on the policy front about which way to go with it.
well, and the collection system budget will be next Monday at SAM, so people can watch it on COSIDE TV. They can come. And I think we'll have paperwork which will make this better. Why don't we make this just an old business item on every agenda and get a report as to where we are? Folks can read the minutes on, from December 6th on the January 17th meeting, and I have a speaker slip.
But wait, before,
Okay.
I have one more question. So I have a different comment from Scott, is from, we just had from Rick. So we're going to redirect Clemens to look at the contract with Sam. In the meantime, do nothing to look at our taking over collections and hold off on that? Is that
Well,
the direction?
this is not an action item right now. That's the problem that we've got.
You can't really
So
give direction.
we can't give direction on it.
Let's put it on the next board meeting.
Right.
And then we can
And-
then.
Exactly,
reevaluate
and it
that.
can be an action item, and we can give direction. Tim Costello.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
How y'all doing? Question, and I know it's not an action item now. What are you doing?
Making sure it's on.
It's fine. Can't you hear me? I know it's not an action item on the collection thing. You said you got my good side. And I have parents, because I know that there was talk of the collection thing and working with El Granada, and because where Montero goes, a lot of times El Granada goes. They had concerns, my parents in El Granada, about their sewer rates, if they would be stable, if they would see an increase. And I live in Half Moon Bay, so it theoretically could affect me, I guess, depending on what happened if Montero decided to work with Half Moon Bay. I was just trying to get some sort of insight on what's going on. That's
Well, I guess we'll see
obviously
you-
if rates go up or down, or if I have to go all spider monkey or whatever, you know.
Well, I can tell you, I'm committed to trying to keep rates from going up if we can find ways to avoid that.
I think everyone here is.
But, we have to acknowledge that something's happened, that despite best efforts,
Yes.
if someone withdraws from an aspect of SAM, rates going up to some degree seems like, that could lead to that. So we've got to take steps to try to avoid that happening. And so we need
Good.
to know what our options are.
Yes, I have ideas too. But
Well, and the
but
other,
I'm here as a citizen, so.
thank you. But the other concern is what happens to our ratepayers from this lawsuit. That's whether it goes to court or whether a settlement is reached, it's going to require some restructuring of finances
So Catherine, it's going to be an action item on the next.
on our
agenda.
next meeting.
So, well, we'll report at the next meeting. We won't have everything finished that we're supposed to do, but we'll bring a report up.
But after the report, board can give direction.
It'll be an action item on both the possible contract with Half Moon Bay and
No.
looking at it.
Possible contract was, on a new contract or existing contract with Sam, not Half Moon
Excuse
Bay.
me. I apologize. On the existing or a new contract with Sam.
As well as
Okay.
a progress report on,
I would like to leave ourselves a lot of room and say, look, we have to deal with collections. We may want to do some arrangement with the individual members. We may want to do something specific with Sam. We may want to do both. We don't know yet. We don't know what our choices are.
I agree.
I have long been of the very firm and outspoken point of view that together we're better. So keeping the team together at SAM has been something that we've invested heavily in. Don't want to throw that out, but when somebody comes in and we just have to think hard, and the kind of information that staff has long brought us has always helped us make good decisions on this stuff. So.
good. Moving on, I'm going to interject. I got two speaker slips from Greg Diegas. One on fire preparedness, oral comment, and it's come and gone. We can talk We can take a vote to have it at the end, if your comments at the end of the meeting if you'd like, or you can just come back in 2 weeks. And your capital expenditure slip will deal with under the mid-year budget. Moving on to review and possible action concerning generator purchase for Alta Vista site.
Thank you, Catherine. So, we actually planned for a new generator at the Alta Vista plant this fiscal year. However, we didn't know that we would need it so soon, or actually that we would definitely need it, because the existing generator failed. It's an old unit that was purchased used by Cal-Am. These generators don't run a lot of hours, but they sit in the environment out here, so they might as well live on a boat. So they're rusting quite a bit. This one now has the actual coil burnt through, and then there are some other issues with it, so it's getting way too expensive to repair the unit. So what we did is we were already looking at some sizing generators before this, but now we have to trigger getting quotes. And we received 3 quotes. I want to say we're suggesting to purchase the cheapest one, but the criteria that we used is actually lead time when it gets here. These generators, unfortunately, none of them is built yet. So the shortest lead time is 6 months, and so we'll have to. We're currently renting a generator, and that costs us $3,000 a month. So the recommendation is to move to waive formal advertisement for bids for purchase of an emergency power generator from PERC Rentals, based on the finding that its quote provides the shortest delivery time, which is a critical factor in responding to emergency power demands, and to authorize the general manager to execute a purchase order in form approved by district council for the purchase, and that would be over not to exceed $75,000.
Discussion, gentlemen.
Since I'm kind of new to this, what's the typical bid process when you talk about you're trying to waive? So can you give me a sense of what you're trying to waive versus the bids that you got?
Well,
Is it more advertised as opposed to, I guess,
yes.
direct?
Yes, it is more advertised, but we are also bound by offers that are coming in.
Yeah, it's more to understand the process that you're waiving more
Yes,
than.
so it's a process, the engineer is involved, which is going to cost us money to prepare documents, et cetera, et cetera. So this is just staff, just us doing this.
Okay.
But we're pretty comfortable. I mean, we're buying generators on a regular basis. We've actually replaced quite a number of generators on the sewer side. On the water side, they're just now reaching that age, since 15 years ago we purchased the water system, and we haven't really changed out generators.
And you said this was something that you guys planned for this year anyway, right?
Yeah, we have $75,000 in the CIP for this generator. We actually have another generator in the capital, a smaller one for $25,000.
Okay.
And that might come very soon for our airport treatment plant.
So these are all quotes for the new equipment, right?
Yes.
And they're all sized, they're perfect for what we need at the site?
Yes. One of the issues that we're really running into is that generators more than 50 horsepower, or 50 kW, excuse me, I think it is, which means that it is now required to be a Tier 4 generator under the Air Quality Board. The Tier 4, what that means is it needs to burn cleaner. Yes, burn cleaner. And the way to do this is somewhat of an experiment, I think, for all the generator folks. It involves somehow heating the exhaust or adding equipment that heats the exhaust up, heats the exhaust up before it goes through the exhaust pipe. This one here is the simplest technology. It just heats the exhaust pipe. But the Tier 4 is, it's somewhat counterproductive. So ultimately, they're burning more fuel to save fuel, kind of a deal on the Tier 4 generators. So
And so
we have to bite a bullet on
the
this.
Herc Reynolds one doesn't actually say that. I take it you've confirmed that this is for a Tier 4. The other two quotes say that, yeah.
Tell me about anybody else? Can you tell me about the warranties on these? I know Peterson, I know the company Peterson Cat, I know Caterpillar machines. The parts are readily available. They're a sturdy, well-built machine. I've never heard of Multi-Quip. Where is it from? And what's the warranty and the backup on parts, for instance?
Under the Herc rental. It's the Herc rental.
It's the Herc rental.
Under the Herc rental?
Yeah, it's the type of generator.
Yeah, so I think Herc is Multi-Quip.
Yes.
And it's definitely, we have Multi-Quip generators in the district that we're working
Okay.
with. It's an established company, that's what I can say about it.
So parts are readily available?
Parts are readily available, absolutely. Yes.
Okay, good.
It's a brand new unit with new possibility of parts.
Good. Anything else? Do we have a motion?
Headquartered in California, by the way.
Oh, good.
I make
Thank
the
you.
motion.
A second.
All right, motion by Jim and second by Eric. All those in favor? Aye. Opposed, abstentions, motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to the review and possible action concerning nitrate reduction system purchase.
Okay, so we are in the process of adding a treatment plant to the Airport Well 3. That's a state requirement to be able to continue to use the well. Just as information, recently the well has seen a nitrate exceedance over 10 years ago. We have not run the well. We simply haven't produced water into the system since from this well. But we would like to keep the well and keep it active. We are sampling it on a regular basis. We've not seen the nitrate exceedance since. However, the one-time exceedance triggers a requirement for treatment.
Forever?
Well, for a very long time. Yes, we were able to remove a treatment plant after we've seen 30 years of non-detect on the contaminant. So it's possible, but right now the state definitely wants us to add a treatment plant if we want to ever use this well. So we got that authorized. That plant is almost complete, and what we need is the same system that we have at the North Airport Well 2. The vessels were originally purchased under Siemens, was I think our first agreement, and that was done under George Irving at the time. So this is going back pretty much 15 years. At the time, there was no purchase option. We now looked at this, and there is now an offer to purchase, and there's an offer. So we looked at this for both treatment plants, and the quotes are the quotes that we got from the vendor. Now it's Evoqua. Ultimately, it's still Siemens. They're just changing names. And same system. So what we're looking at is really purchasing vessels that we've been renting so far for the North Airport Well 2 and doing the same for the Airport Well 3 right from the start. So the quotes are somewhat a little bit difficult to read through this, but ultimately, let me dive into this. We're right now looking at a rental cost of, I believe it's $1,500 per month per well site. So it would be $3,000 in rental that we would pay going forward. Plus, by the way, for the new site, there is a mobilization charge of $51,000 that would apply. The vendor has to purchase the vessels, establish them, et cetera, et cetera. So what we're instead looking at, so what I did with the 51,000 is I simply divided it by 20, saying, okay, it's going to last about 20 years, and added it into the calculation that way. So if we're looking at purchasing the vessels, hold on, let me go to the staff report. I think I got the total in there. So if we would rent this over 20 years, we would, if we rent both systems over 20 years, the vessels would be around $38,000 per year. If we purchase the vessels outright, we need to put down $156,000 now that we haven't budgeted for. However, the cost compared to the $38,000 per year would be only $7,800 per year. So there's a substantial saving, $540,000 over 20 years. So we have the existing plant at the north. That is why we're asking, that's the reason why we're asking to mirror the exact same system with the same vendor. And that's why we also are asking here the same thing that we did before, and that is to waive the formal advertisement for bids for purchase of the nitrate reduction system for the North Airport Well and the Airport Well 3, based on the findings that purchase from the current vendor results in efficiencies and economies not attainable under formal competitive bidding, and authorize the general manager to execute a purchase order with Evoqua Water Technologies in form approved by District Council for purchase of those systems.
Jim, you had a comment.
So, Clemens, maybe I missed this, but since the testing 20 years ago was so dismal, and we are keeping the well is functional. Why do we have to do this on these wells? I mean, wouldn't it be? I mean, I don't know the details, and I'm ignorant on this, but wouldn't it be just enough to keep the well functional, to be able to draw water? And then if we did need to access, get the water in an emergency, or if we needed it, then do these things and get the filtration system, cleaning system, processing system at that point. Why do we have to do this now?
Well, I mean, if you need the water, you need the treatment plant to be functional. Getting all this in place is a months-long process. I mean, the treatment plant needs to be first constructed, right? So when it is constructed, now that we plug the vessels in, it's not simply done by plugging the vessels in. There's a testing phase, there's a follow-up phase. We need to make sure that that the treatment plant is actually functional and working. So it's not as if when we need the water, we could simply buy a plant and plug it in. So the plan needs to be established for us to use the well in case we need it.
Well, with we have Alta Vista, we have other wells in the district? Are we in that situation where we would ever, in an emergency, have to depend upon these wells? Or maybe I shouldn't be asking these questions at this point.
No, you should.
No, it's perfectly fine. Well, let me say it this way. This is a well that is, we're counting the capacity of this well for the entire district. We're issuing permits according to a capacity where this well is calculated in. So we need to use it. Ultimately, what I said at the beginning is, if we don't implement this treatment plant, the state is going to put this well in standby, meaning it is not usable under any circumstance.
That's,
Okay?
That's what I-
So that is,
that's what I guess I missed.
So that is the arrangement that we have for the Airport South well, which is disconnected. So if we would want to use the Airport South well, we would have to notify the public that the water is not potable.
So the sense of urgency is because you don't know what the risk is from the state making that decision?
No.
Or
The state-
they've told you that if you don't have this done by a certain period of time, or get started?
By December 31st, 2018. If we don't have that plan in place by then.
2019, you mean?
No, 2018. If we don't have that plan in place by then.
I basically had a similar question, which is, or is it better to continue throwing huge amounts of money at these wells, which have potential problems? Or do we have future plans for looking at additional wells in good areas that might, so we wouldn't even have to
Yes,
use these wells?
very good question. So,
Or let CCWD have these?
So very good question. But we definitely want to prioritize better quality water
Right.
from the back of Montero. And we're going to do everything to get more sources with higher quality water. But being in a situation that no other agency on the peninsula is, which is that we produce all of our water ourselves.
Mhm.
We do not have an intertie to any other agency.
Yeah.
I can tell you that we will never give up these sources, at least if you're asking me.
Yeah.
That's my recommendation, to never give up these sources. If we pump that water now or not is irrelevant. It's capacity that we can use. And if we need this 5 years from now or 20 years from now, depends on the circumstances, of course, but we might need it tomorrow.
and how much does it cost to get a new functioning source of water from
Well, if we look at the Alta Vista well, a rough estimate is that we're probably getting close to $1 million in all costs to establish that well.
So-
If I understand correctly, what you're saying is
closed section?
by investing something now, we maintain the elasticity in our water supply, which, I mean, in terms of keeping our available water that we can pump in case of any kind of urgent loss anywhere else in the system, this keeps our top end number, which Water Resources, or the State Water Department really cares about, right? And we started out as a highly constrained system where we had to pump everything we had all the time just to make ends meet.
Yes.
And now we've got the standby reserve, so we can afford to lose our biggest source and still have ample to serve the community. And by having the elasticity in our supply, we can choose which to produce.
Yes, absolutely correct.
So this is spending to maintain that flexibility in our overall supply.
Yes. And just, Jim, also, we're not asking for the decision for the treatment plant. The board already authorized this, and it's built. We're looking at cleaning the site up and painting the pipe, and then plugging the vessels in. This is really just a question of, should we rent and spend a lot of money on renting each year? Or should we now take this step and purchase the vessels? I want to assure everyone that we have the $160,000 in the bank, and even though we didn't plan for spending that money, I think there is some projects, capital projects that we didn't implement on the water side.
But it would save money.
It's going to save
It's a 5-year payback.
$500,000
It's a
over
5-year payback.
and that doesn't take any cost increases, of course, into account. Over the 20 years, we would see that cost go up.
Yep.
I guess when you guys were putting the treatment plants, you just didn't anticipate this or hadn't thought of the options at that time? Is that really what it came down to?
When we
When you knew you were going to put the plants in because you already put in the treatment? Like you said, you've already...
So we knew that we had to make this decision when we came to the board asking for the authorization of the plant 6 months ago.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But you just hadn't gotten to this cost or...
Correct.
Okay.
We did not have the conversation with Evoqua was finished, and now we have all the numbers. Yeah.
Okay.
Any more questions? No, and I will just finish with Mark Twain's quote about whiskey is for drinking and water is for fighting. You just don't give it up. Moving on. Oh, let's take a vote. All those in favor? Aye.
Do we need a motion first, or?
Oh, somebody.
I move that we waive the formal advertisement for bids for purchase of nitrate collection systems for North Airport Well and Airport Well 3, based on the finding the purchase from the current vendor results in efficiencies and economies not attainable under formal competitive bidding, and authorize the general manager to execute a purchase order with Evoqua Water Technologies LLC and form approved by District Council for purchase of those systems.
Do we have a second?
I could not have said that better.
Okay.
I did have a little help.
Who made the second?
I did.
Eric, okay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries unanimously. Moving right along to, thank you, the strategic plan.
Yes. So it is called Review and Possible Action Concerning Update of MWSD Strategic Plan. We approved our first strategic plan in early 2015. We attached what we have back from 2016. We went through a review. So there's hopefully an overview of what we did back then. And yeah, I think we have actually a new board, at least 2 new board members. And I think it is worth going through a somewhat larger update than the standard one. The standard one didn't really work. The update in 2016, it was not completed. So I think with that experience, we definitely want to have our consultant in here walking us through. We actually think, I talked with Martin Roush about basically somewhat of a scope that we're offering now as a suggestion to the board, which involves basically one board workshop and several individual interviews of board and staff. So it's somewhat larger, but it's not a huge, it's not like we're starting from scratch on this plan. So the main event, besides interviews in the background, would be really the board workshop. And so what we're looking for is an agreement from the board on really the scope of services, if that is okay, and or if there is anything else that the board would like to see. The second is really the timing is for us now the biggest concern. We'd like to see this strategic plan in the context of our budget, and so we're looking at that timeline with it as well. And so knowing at least the availability of some of you folks, we had to push this back already to, what is it, May 13 through, was it the 24th? Yeah. So that's really a possible window that we identified right now, and the only option would be to push it further back. But we're hoping to get that commitment right now that we can find time for a board workshop during that, during those 2 weeks. And if the scope looks somewhat acceptable, then we would continue to work with Martin on preparing this. And yes.
Yeah, is this more in rolling through this, and like with us and with Sam, we have 5-year and 20-year capital plans. Are those merged into these in any way, or is it?
So we don't have a 20-year capital plan.
Okay. Sam has been working on one, is that what it was?
So I would almost say the other way around. I think the CIP should be based on the strategic plan.
On the strategic plan, okay.
Partially, right?
I just want to know how much details, will we, in the strategic plan, will we be talking about individual pieces of equipment also, or just more the big strategic stuff and not the tactical equipment?
Do we have?
Not really, but maybe it helps to look at what we actually
That's
attached, which is
Yeah.
kind of, you see the detail, the granularity in which we drill down.
Yeah, I
Sorry,
think that's
Scott.
fine.
No, exactly what I was going to ask. I didn't know if we had it in hard form, but it's online. And I just want to say, this is something that years ago when Catherine started kind of beating on this drum, I'm like, yeah, we're actually a very highly engaged board. We don't really need this. And it's been a terrific thing for the board and for the staff to really help focus us on priorities. But even more than that, it's been a tremendous benefit for the members of the community who come and participate. And we have had some of the most positive, useful interaction from members of the community as we've done this process. And I just want to take the opportunity to say thank you to Catherine for pushing so hard on that, even when the initial take wasn't exactly receptive, and for Clemens and for Martin as well. Martin has really proven out to be an extraordinary resource for helping us get more out of what we do. So I'm really supportive of this, and I'm glad you brought it
That's
forward.
fine.
Any other comments?
No, I think it's a good idea.
I don't see that there's a public meeting in this. It looks like it's all board workshops,
So the board workshop would be a public meeting.
Open to the
Yes.
open to the
And it
public.
would
So
be
we
open
would
to the
not
public.
have a large space rented where we would, where we could invite the whole community.
Well, I mean, again, it's a public workshop, it's a public meeting. We definitely would agendize it and encourage folks to participate. But it's not, you're correct, it would not be what we did before, where we put up, I think we invited them by mailer.
Yes.
And I think there was announcements everywhere. So
Yes,
this was
every telephone pole.
This was a big outreach effort to get folks into the room and participate.
But I would like to make sure that we have a concerted effort to get the public there. This lawsuit is going, whatever happens with it, our finances are going to change. One way or the other. And I think it's very important for this board to hear what the priorities, if the priorities of the community are still all there. I'm very concerned that one of the reasons the community supports this district is because we are inclusive with the district. And I have watched other districts who have, for instance, changed their functions somewhat. They haven't invited the public in. And the public's going, what happened? And I think one of our strengths as a district since day one has been that we are so solidly in communication and listening to the public. That's how we got to be a water district.
Right. So, I mean, I had this discussion with Martin, and it was clear to us that this is not a brand new strategic plan. It's also understood that we definitely want the community to participate. So again, the recommendation from Martin is to hold a public board workshop where the board and the public are working together through this.
Okay, that's
And
good.
he is not recommending the workshop forums that we had before, where the board did not participate,
Right.
but only the public and staff ran the meeting.
Right, right.
So that would be definitely a different scale, and we can do that, but I think it would increase the cost tremendously.
Yeah.
So now we're talking
Well, then,
about
let's
$15,000.
let's make sure that we do the board and public workshop on a day that is not a soccer day, so that, and not a work day, so that, or look at what the sports schedules are, because a lot of people here are involved with their kids in sports, and I want, one of the things that has,
So not a soccer day, not a work day.
Well,
That would be July 4th. We can't actually meet on a national holiday,
so how
But
about
we-
we turn this
but-
around?
but we could do an afternoon, for instance, on a
So this is
Saturday.
the real purpose. We want you to agree to a date. So how about you suggest a date, and everybody's
Okay,
looking
well,
at their calendar, we
We'll
So
have
you're
to look at
suggesting-
that.
You're suggesting an afternoon, because
I'm-
most of the kids' sports are in the morning.
I agree.
Is that what
Yeah.
you're getting at?
Yeah,
It's fair.
and let me see, May 20, 21, 22 is the legislative days in Sacramento, but those are weekdays anyway.
The 25th is 18th and the 25th are the Saturdays.
Yeah.
My preference would be the 18th, May
Yeah.
18th, if we can do it that quickly.
Do it now
Well,
before we create a conflict, so that's good.
Yeah,
May 18th.
that's my suggestion.
So,
Can we,
you guys okay?
you know, being an older person with a paper calendar on the refrigerator, can I have one day to consult my paper calendar?
Go
You
call
mean you
Kathy.
don't have a camera you can focus in on your paper
I've
calendar?
got plenty of cameras. Only one paper calendar.
Okay. Yeah, let's tentatively schedule May 18th unless Jim
Okay.
checks his paper calendar.
So what's the other Saturday?
It's the 20th.
23rd?
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you let us know
That's not a
also what's
Saturday.
happening on
No, the
21st?
27th.
That's not a Saturday.
Oh, 25th.
25th. Okay, I'll let you know
What's the
tomorrow.
difference?
I'll let the, can I notify the whole board?
Yes, I think this is.
It's either the 18th or the 25th.
Scheduling a board meeting is not a problem.
Okay, I'll notify the whole board tomorrow morning, tonight.
And
1 o'clock, is that what
Yes,
we're talking
time.
roughly?
Yeah, 1 p.m.
1 p.m.?
Yep.
That means is we probably don't get coffee and donuts.
We can
Just
still have
pointing
coffee
out,
and
just
donuts.
pointing out the possible, logistical
Well,
challenges here.
I don't know why not.
I was what?
Or I want,
We may have to bring our own.
I want to specify the kind of donut that
Oh, boy, okay. So we have a suggested date, and
I'll get back to you tomorrow morning.
we're directing, do we need a vote on this? I think you've received
Not for-
direction.
Schedule,
I think-
just a schedule.
Yeah, I think this was, just scheduling.
Okay. Good. Now we're moving on to the mid-year budget review.
Okay, thank you. So, since we have Maze in the house, we actually made improvements, I think pretty much every year on our finances and drilled further down
Good job, Peter.
into essentially making sure that it's presented in a transparent way. And 2 or 3 years ago, we started with the mid-year budget review. It's really, for us, the beginning of the next year's budget. We're really looking at how we're doing this year and prepare a first draft from that. So we definitely want you to understand that the first draft that comes out of this mid-year budget review, we're going to take a look at with the Finance Committee, bring it to the board in draft form. We usually do that. We bring it in draft form, then send it back to the Finance Committee after the full board had a chance to weigh in, and then we bring it back in a final version. So that's kind of like the process that we established throughout the years now. And with that, I would like to ask Peter to come up and tell us how we're doing.
Clemens has all but stolen my thunder as far as discussing the process in which we've followed for the last 3 or 4 years. This piece is really just, we do a mid-year now. We also do a fiscal year-end budget to actual, which is compared to the audit. The mid-year, as Clemens says, really takes us in through the budget process to see how we're tracking through 6 months of activity. And the view that you guys have in front of you is really what we've grown comfortable with as far as the look of our budget. So when we compare that through our mid-year to see how we're tracking on all major expense categories as well as the revenue categories to display in a cash flow look as opposed to strictly the P&L. On a monthly basis through the consent agenda, you also have a couple different views as far as our QuickBooks budget to actual for the month ending, as well as the month-by-month activities beginning from the beginning of the fiscal year and showing all accounts and how they have had their monthly activities. So with that, I said the first 2 pages, you guys have looked at it, so just in terms of overall large variances, items that I wanted to point out, I'll start with the sewer side. Everything on the revenue side is tracking pretty well, except for fees, you'll notice, are extremely high. This has been, it's really since the beginning of the fiscal year, they are really just much larger than we had anticipated during the budget process last year. Tracy, as well as staff, can speak more to that at a later time as far as what is going on, but they are being inundated with requests for new projects. So that's the revenue side of things. On the expenditure side of things, for the most part, I said tracking relatively well. Outside of that, for our investment, the interest revenue is doing far better than what we had anticipated. That is LAIF is just performing above expectations. Capital projects, these are just, we budgeted a lot of money for them. The projects are ongoing, but just not to the percentage level that we've had expected. We're also a month behind, so we will be catching up on these. Connection fees, you'll see there, 33% lower than we had anticipated, and we were actually far below budget, but when we're now here midway through March, January saw a very large increase in the number of connections issued, so we are at budget at this point. And then debt, we are on track. For the water side of things, ending for sewer, just cash flow negative at this point, which is customary. The first roll comes in November, December, we don't get all the way there till about March or April of the current fiscal year, current calendar. So that's sewer, on the water side of things, revenues are tracking very well. The water side of things, okay, we are where we had anticipated to be at the beginning of the budget season, so that's all positive. Revenues, all very positive. Personnel for water, we are lower than anticipated, but that's mainly because during the budget process, we had anticipated bringing on a fourth operator. That has yet to happen, so all those costs that we had anticipated have not been incurred at this point. Engineering is the one, a very large outlier, and I think it's kind of the previous discussion leads us to more of an understanding as to why. Those are really the two line items that I wanted to highlight. Outside of that, I think we're tracking relatively well. Once again, capital projects haven't come off as we had anticipated at this point, but it goes hand in hand with kind of the seasons. With that, the next two pages are really comparisons to the time period being 12/31/17 compared to 12/31/2018, just to give a side-by-side for the two period endings. And those are the next two pages. After that is the full GL with activities, and then the very end shows the roll-ups as to how I'm coming up with my categorizations. With that, any questions would like to have answered?
Just one quick one on, and it's just definitions, what they mean, because I'm fairly new. On the first page, when you were talking about the sewer fees are up humongously, are sewer fees what we charge customers when they hook up?
No.
No.
I'm getting a little...
No, the connection fees are, as far as when they want to tie in, when a prospective customer ties in, that would be down in the connection fees, but these are just for the existing customers, what is charged for their sewer service
It's
charge.
the usage.
Usage, correct.
No.
Okay.
No,
No,
wait.
it's not.
No.
So
That's-
what is listed here under sewer fees is fees for new construction projects or remodel projects. This
Okay.
is administration fees, etc.
Okay.
Okay? And what we're seeing here is the state's efforts to ease the second dwelling unit permitting and streamlining of that. So a lot of people are getting interested in second dwelling units, which in our area is a lot of it's legalizations as well as new
Okay.
partitioning second units, etc. So that plays a part of this. That's why you're seeing this under remodel. So we
Okay.
see a lot of remodel
Remodel
fees.
fees.
Correct. That is
Okay.
the specific line item that is really blowing up, would
Okay.
be the remodel fees. We said there are a number of fees in that category which are adopted annually through the master fee schedule.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else? Okay, Greg, you had a comment on capital expenditures.
Greg Diegas, Montera. Yeah, I would have hoped to have made these comments before you just voted to approve the two capital expenditures, but where I come from, a capital equipment procurement analysis is done which shows the impact on the budget of the proposed expense. It's not merely a cash transaction where you're debiting a fixed asset and crediting the cash account. There's the question of what did it do to the depreciation that was already on the books? What's it going to do with the new asset? Okay, what is the operating expense going to be? What is the maintenance expense going to be? What about the labor associated with the operating maintenance? How is that all changing, if at all, because of this procurement? And what I thought I heard was the first item you approved was in fact a piece of capital somewhere on a ledger that somebody expected to replace. It's just sooner. Okay, but at the bottom of the form, and you know, Sam did a form on the projects in their 5-year plan that was pretty good, but it also omitted a synopsis of the financial impact. Why not just have half a dozen fields down there that says depreciation changes from X to Y, maintenance costs change from P to Q, et cetera, et cetera. The second thing you just agreed to, I don't know why it was overlooked when you made the agreement to fund the treatment plant, but that sounds like a budget variance that the ratepayers are now going to be made aware of sometime. But it sounds to me like we should have had an analysis of what the impact would have been. And so I'm suggesting a simple form that summarizes this, because it wasn't clear when I read the agenda that the first item was in the budget. It just said the generator failed, we need to replace it. Okay, my view of a capital plan is you've got a spreadsheet, every asset's on it, it lasts forever. Some of them roll off every few years, some of them stay on for 20, but there shouldn't be any surprises. And when there is something changing, there should be some quantification. That's my comment.
Thank you.
Thank you, Joe.
Would you guys want me to respond?
Please.
Okay. Sure. All right. So, first of all, let's stay with the generator. So we already have a generator that is being maintained. Okay. So there is no change in staffing, maintenance, or any scheduled work. If, then we can anticipate a reduction in repairs and failures, but we don't know what those are going to be anyways. Okay, so this is simply a replacement of an existing equipment. The impact to the budget, to the cash flow, really is zero. Now, you brought the, we have the schedule. We have $75,000 planned for this in the capital project, right? In CIP. So we're spending over plan. Meaning there's no budget impact whatsoever. Now, you brought the depreciation up, and with that, I'm going to say it flat out, and Peter is going to correct me. We're a public agency. We're not planning to sell this agency at a time soon. We're not a startup that is worried about what our company is worth. Okay? So depreciation is something that we're looking at, that we're considering, that we're assessing. But as a public agency, as running this public agency, I'm not very concerned with depreciation. So, and Peter, maybe you can.
Well, let me interject that Paul, whose picture is on the wall, always wanted us to have an account for replacement as we're building, like depreciation for replacement costs, and we looked at doing that. And at that point in time, the impact on rates was such that we decided that was a nice to do, but we were trying to get a water company that actually had pipes the water could flow through. So we maybe on a future board.
Well, if I might, we have addressed this. I mean, we engaged in that question year over year, every August with Paul for a number of years, and it's not for not looking at it, but what we came down to is what has been our longstanding policy: is plan as well as we could, make sure that we have money saved up for the expenses that we know are coming, and reserves in place for the expenses that we didn't. And we have reserve policies about the levels of funding for the reserves, for making sure that we have adequate based on our experience and common best practice. I'm totally in agreement about, look, if we have a piece of equipment that's failing and is costing us a lot, we could spend some time thinking about the amount of money we're going to save by not having to do a bunch of emergency repairs, or we can get on with the business of replacing the equipment. We have historically had occasions where, especially when money was tight in a given year, staff brought us the proposal that rather than stick with the CIP plan for replacement of a generator, we would increase the cost for doing additional maintenance to extend the life of that thing until a time when we were a little more flush and we could afford to go out and buy something new. So these are all things that we do on a regular and consistent and public basis. this is longstanding practice with this agency, to be mindful of the cash flow, mindful of the budget, mindful of the reserves. Depreciation is a kind of a commercial approach to dealing with what you do for things that wear out. We take it from the approach of we've got to keep the infrastructure wholesome and operational, and so we focus on maintenance and replacement.
Peter, do you mind if Pippin speaks ahead of you?
Just a quick comment on that. Both those discussions bring to mind two aspects that aren't capturable in depreciation, and that one of which has been discussed tonight with regard to the water treatment system. This happens also frequently in terms of generators and other aspects in our public business. That's regulatory pressure. You can't put that on a depreciation scale. They can come in and say, this generator is no longer legal, this well is no longer legal. You have to just adjust your budget and figure out how to deal with that. For best practices in long-term planning, I know Peter carries depreciation schedules. We always look at that on the big picture for how we come up with a foundation, a basis for our capital costs and our long-term approach to the systems. But here, you can take those depreciation factors in Montera and put a 1/2 in front of them. Thank you to the salt air. Corrosion, we love living here, but we really this crew has to stay active on their equipment. So the regulatory pressure was the main thing I wanted to add there, that it's not easy to put onto a table. So it's very hard to predict.
You believe you guys captured it. It said what Clement said as far as not being concerned. It is the balance sheet and the overall health of the district is something that I think we are all concerned about, and that does play a big part in it. The depreciation number, we said we discuss it at least twice a year. Once, I said in August, and once with the audit report that comes out. Because when our statement of activities is only one page, it really lays it out pretty well for you as our income, our expenditures, and we look to be positive the entire year until we apply in depreciation, and that's for the water side. And that really discusses the cost of recovery, and it's been something that we discussed that we would like to have become something that doesn't drop us into negative operations, and we've made steps toward that. But as you guys have said, there comes a point where if something is failing, we need to replace it. And the generator, like I said, was in the budget that was approved back in June of the previous year. So I said, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Greg, thank you for your comments. I think it helps to educate the public.
In his spirit, though, I want to bring something up, because while I agree with the depreciation, I understand why you guys don't. In the spirit of what Greg's trying to say is, in my opinion, it could be off, Greg, but I didn't quite get, it sounds like we kind of do it, but it's more of a cost analysis of your life expectancy. So, Scott kind of presented it and said, hey, we do this, but I think, Greg, in my mind, it's more about kind of setting a schedule of your life expectancy. Depreciation is a form in finance, but really when you do a cost accounting, you're trying to figure out what the life expectancy is. Pippin kind of alluded, you cut it in half, whatever the depreciation is, but really what you're doing is you're trying to say, look, we've got certain pieces of equipment and we've got life expectancy in all of these, and I think that would be helpful, not necessarily within the budget per se, but it would help when you're doing these types of things to be able to say, hey, look, we know we're coming up on the end of the life because we expected it the last 10 years. We've got a lot of maintenance going on, but that kind of schedule would be helpful in this, because then it would kind of help understand how it affects the budget.
You're talking about asset management.
To a degree, yeah. It doesn't have to be sophisticated. It's more about a simplistic type of approach, so that really for what may be transparent to the board or even to staff that's dealing with it, it becomes a little bit easier for the public to be able to say, now I understand why you're thinking, we got to replace these pieces of equipment, because it's been sitting out here. We've had it for 20 years. You kind of describe it, but it doesn't look like it from a schedule perspective. That, to me, helps you with your budgeting anyway, and you probably go through that. It's just not obvious when we sit down, because it's not sitting on some kind of, it's really just a grid you know, and you're saying, hey, look, we're coming into the yellow on these items, we're in green on these items, but we're in red here, and these are the items that are then associated to why we're changing our budget, we're doing the things that we're doing. So that's probably in line with what you guys are talking about, but we don't visually see it. So.
Yes, so and if you're diving into the CIP and participate in the discussion, you'll see that that is what we're essentially doing for the CIP. And that is where, you know, you'll find the Alta Vista generator, and, you know, it just failed now, so we have to come basically and say, we didn't plan for it
Right.
properly, you know, we planned for it and then the unit failed. That is not the case for the treatment plant. That's understood. It's an extraordinary expenditure.
Yes.
Now, it's not impacting rates. We have reserves for cases like this. This is not going to impact rates in any way. If we're under or over budget by 4 or 5%, that is normal, and that is not going to be an impact to the ratepayer directly.
Great.
Thank you.
Take care of it.
Moving right along then to the next item, which is the SAM budget process update.
Yeah, thank you, Catherine. So we actually received the O&M budget. Beverly sent this already to us. However, what we don't have right now with that O&M is the collections services budget. And so this is going to, as we already mentioned, this is going to be brought to the SAM board at the March 25 SAM meeting. We'll learn how the SAM board, what the SAM board, if there's any action that the SAM board takes. And so we anticipate right now to bring the full budget, O&M, infrastructure, collections, to the board on April 4th. And if that changes, then we know we have at least an O&M and infrastructure budget to look at.
Any comments, questions?
What did we authorize at SAM to send out to all the agencies?
It's
The O&M.
That's just the O&M, okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
And collections is going to be up on Monday.
Right, we hadn't gotten a definitive answer, and we're still trying to figure out at SAM what's going on with the Half Moon Bay contract. And so that's, it's all up in the air.
Any indication that they intended to bring some kind of clarity on Monday?
Nope.
No. They just said they have to go back and talk to their people.
Do we know whether or not they have had an opportunity to have a council meeting between then and Monday?
Well, I haven't checked their agendas, but to be real honest, Half Moon Bay is always a mystery.
They're just...
So, moving on, review and possible action concerning California Association of Sewer Agencies, that's CASA, outreach opposing Senate Bill 332.
Yeah, thanks. So SB 332 is introduced by Hertzberg and Wiener. And what it's looking at is a reduction of ocean discharge by 50%, and that by 2030. By 2040, they want 95%. So what this means is, by 2030, we're supposed to, if this goes through, we're supposed to reduce the sewage that is, or this ultimately, not the sewage.
Let's say the treated wastewater.
Treatment plant effluent that is discharged into the ocean.
But we don't discharge sewage in the ocean.
We choose to reduce the sewage by 50% to achieve that goal, but it's going to be difficult.
Everybody goes on a diet?
Oh, no. Might help. ultimately, it's supposed to encourage recycled water. This is what this bill is, of course, designed to do. CASA, that's the California Agency of Sanitation Agencies, however, sees that this is somewhat of a one-size-fits-all approach that doesn't necessarily make sense to all agencies in California. We are one of those. CASA acknowledges, and specifically the issues that we have out here with recycled water, which has to do with finding a customer. You need somebody who uses the recycled water. What are you going to do with the recycled water? You have to transport it, and you have to use it.
Well, and you have to pay for it.
And you have to
depreciate it.
and you have to pay for. Somebody has to pay for it.
Well, just imagine if we said, okay, we're just going to send all that back to all the toilets and use it to flush all the toilets. We could really reduce a lot, but that would mean that every building with every toilet would need a second set of pipes. And that can be done, but it's much more easily done in new construction than it's done in retrofitting. And either way, it's going to cost money, but the retrofit is perhaps the single most expensive way to do it. And that's why agencies like this one have been focused on trying to find new uses where people could really use a lot of water to give us a way to, instead of putting it into the ocean, put it on crops, put it on golf courses. That's what Daly City does. They have multiple golf courses. They're kind of blessed with an abundance of recycled water usage opportunities, and people who pay greens fees who can help fund that.
And a high-density population.
Right, but it's for us, it's find generally agricultural users, or the money's not just going to fall from the sky.
No, it's so.
Where this goes when people go, really go push to shove on this, is they talk about drinking this water, and then
Which they do in Orange County.
but they have a large scale operation that's very well funded and goes through kind of a treatment process that I still have some questions about, but I can see that they can afford to do something at that scale that would be very difficult to do here on the coast side. The only reasonable way to consider drinking that water might be to do reverse osmosis, and that's just like the most expensive way to recycle water there is. So I'm appreciative of CASA putting together this thoughtful response.
I think for the audience, the CASA letter says that in today's dollars, the cost to local water and wastewater agencies across the state would be more than $20 billion. So we're talking about probably a doubling of that by the time this gets, knowing how construction projects
And that would
work.
just be up front, and then you got your operational costs, because every drop of water you produce through recycling costs you money. It takes energy to do it.
Right.
And then it costs money to pump it somewhere, through the pipes that you had to pay through separately. And, it's just, we know ways to do it, but this kind of mandate is well-intentioned, but it's maybe too big and too blunt.
I'm willing to oppose it.
They would also be adding a penalty of $2,000 per acre foot of water discharged over the proposed reduction requirement, which is a huge number.
That's a lot of money.
So I hear consensus that we're going to authorize the general manager to submit an opposition letter.
Yes.
Yes.
I second that.
That's actually more than, obviously it's intended, but that's more than it costs to produce.
Right,
So,
right.
Do we need a vote on that?
Do we need a vote or just
Actually, not
direction?
really, but since I asked for it since I brought it to the board, I can send these type of letters without authorization, but I asked for the authorization, so it would be nice if you...
I think, let's have a motion.
Well, no, the board is directed.
The board has given direction, and I appreciate that you bring these, because I think it's important for the public to know about this. What I see going on in the state legislature with the new legislature and the new governor is they seem not to care much about what it costs to live in this state. And for everyday people trying to make ends meet, these are going to be huge impositions. And the other thing that they do, of course, is very slyly, as I said during the president's statement, is they pass it on to local government, and we're the ones who take the heat for it, even though what's happening is in Sacramento. So thank you for bringing this to us. Let me see where we are. We are at reports. General Manager's report.
Nothing.
Nothing to report. I have a question for the board, and that is, Greg had wanted to talk about, make a public comment on fire preparedness. Would you have objections to giving him about 2 or 3 minutes?
No.
No.
Okay. Why don't we have a public citizen report?
Thank you, Board. As you know, I brought up the issue of fire preparedness coastside last September before the Paradise Fire. I brought it up to the MCC and I brought it up here, and staff gave some answers to questions I had posed. I brought it up again in November to the MCC, to December to the MCC, and February to the MCC, and I still don't see it on an agenda anywhere. I did, however, attend with at least 2 MCC members, I'm not one, a wildfire seminar regarding climate change held by CAL FIRE and other agencies. Horsley was there, some other people were there. It was a big deal. So congratulations, we are in the epicenter of San Mateo County's wildfire risk. We are it.
No, that's El Granada. We're fine.
No, we are on the map. We are the dark brown spot, okay? There are several things that came out, one of which will, at least one, if not 2, will affect this district. But I did want to just comment that the mayor of Sonoma was there, and it was frightening to hear her talk about getting the call at 1:30 in the morning. She had no idea who to call, what to do. Some of the phone services weren't working because of the fire. And the Brown Act got in the way because the city council couldn't discuss things in more than minority fashion in order to handle the emergency. Now, contrast that with us. We don't have a mayor. I don't know where those phone calls go, so there is a huge issue in my mind. So I spoke to Horsley, and of the 3 things we discussed, we did agree on one, which was that it'd be a good idea to have an audit of fire preparedness in the Mid-Coast. And I also talked to a couple of fire chiefs. I've had a session with the deputy fire marshal because Ian Larkin finally got back to me 5 months later and suggested that my concerns merited follow-up. And the surrogate for an audit of coastside fire preparedness is something that I think Clemens alluded to. It's an ISO report prepared for the insurance industry. And that report, once we see it, might tell us where we stand, and that would include CCWD. The problem is nobody can find the report. Now, Horsley's agreed it'd be a good idea to have it. I've got 2 staff members in Horsley's group that said they'd help me get it if I have trouble, and I'm still trying to get the deputy fire marshal to find it. He can't even find the old one. I asked Clemens. He told me, speak for yourself, Clemens, but you were out of the loop the last time. You don't have the copy either, and I'll give it to you when I get it. Okay, this also relates to the hydrant pressure, which got me started in this, where the master plan that we produced said 39% of the nodes would fail. So I'm trying to get that quantified. I'm not sure if it's accurate or not. I've asked Clemens for a list of what our hydrants are. I'm going to the deputy fire marshal, finding out what tests they've done over the last 10 years. I'll keep you updated. But the implications are we need to see that report to know whether or not we have a problem, and there may be implications. Some people in CAL FIRE who haven't said this on the record think that we may need more storage, especially for a big wave development. So this is out there. I'll write it up. I'll share it with the board and the MCC when I get the details. I just wanted you to know what's going on.
I want to make one brief correction. I heard 39% of the hydrants failed. That's not true. 39% of the hydrants were below 2,000 gallons per minute. This is a standard that we set ourselves. It's actually the standard for commercial And we're applying it in the residential area, so just a correction that, they didn't fail.
They didn't fail.
Okay? They were
No.
below 2,000, which means that...
And I think you only need for a residence 400 gallons per minute?
750.
750, is that what it is? I'm bad with numbers, but, so we've got that. It's just that, you're right, in a huge conflagration, they'd all be open and we'd be out of water, but it's like building a 10-lane freeway for an hour's worth of traffic a day that you might get every 30 years. It is a concern, but there is also a coast side, what's the word I'm looking for? An emergency planning committee. One of the things that Bill Kehoe was on it. You might want to get in touch with him. He got pretty disgusted because between the county and Half Moon Bay, all of the emergency services and supplies were going to be directed from Half Moon Bay. And so
The supplies are going to be directed by OES.
Yeah, but the OES headquarters was going to be in Half Moon Bay at the police station.
That's the headquarters, but there is material in the district
Oh, okay.
stored at the airport.
So you may want to look up Bill
And we've
Kehoe
got-
and look up OES.
We've got communication links, both wired and radio, right here at the district.
And this district
Yes.
has been the leader in getting those communication links. We actually have an antenna that
Yes.
that we donated to the county for communication.
And off hours, who's that communication with?
Well, Clemens has emergency services authorization under state code and would be a primary point of contact for OES. It's actually pretty well spelled out in the law about how this works. I took the time some years back to read through that.
Staff would get the call for an emergency. It goes through the system.
So you're saying who we would call?
Who would call us, or how would we respond? How would we get the notice of an emergency in our district?
There's several ways this can go. I mean, usually we are alerted to anything going on by customers, right? That's what basically water leaks and these things, right? If we're talking about a scenario like a fire, let's say we have a firestorm rolling down the mountain, right? Quite frankly, I think there is not anything that not a role really that this district would play. Okay, but yes, we would get a call from OES if there would be time, right? Just as, let's say we have it's more, I mean, looking at these scenarios that we have, this all went so fast. There was no phone call that went to anyone in Santa Rosa or Paradise. If we have a tsunami rolling that takes some time, that is when OES calls. All agencies are on the call, stay on the call, get updates. Somebody from this agency is essentially on the phone, listening to this conference call that essentially entire San Mateo participates.
But Clements, I'm sorry, when OAS calls off hour, who do they call in our district?
They call me.
Okay.
They call our superintendent.
Okay. So they call
That's the
staff.
two numbers.
All right.
I will say, Greg, one of the things about the Paradise Fire was, from what I read and noticed, was a lot of the problems had to do with egress and the road condition. And one of the things that concerned me that I think people need to be aware of is our county roads in Montara and Moss Beach were not designed, nor have they been built, to handle a significant increase in population through the increase of second units. And all of these second units that are going in, plus the large projects that are scheduled, what would happen to Highway 1 in people trying to get out? And I think that's something that the community should be very, very concerned about. If we have, because the county is not going to pay to widen the roads. Highway 92 leaving and Highway 1 outside the urban limits are limited to 2 lanes by state law. So perhaps all of the population increase from second units should be taken into account before large units are approved. When the LCP was proposed in when those units were approved in 1980, it was a different situation. And maybe that needs to be looked at. So moving on, that took a little more than 3 minutes, but anyway, moving on to the Sewer Authority Mid-Coast meeting, and I'll let Rick handle that. You were there?
I think we've discussed some of them here already. The big item, the more expensive item, they've been talking about this fire control panel, which has failed a couple times and continues to fail, and we authorized to just go ahead and replace that piece. There was a lot of discussion about, when the fire department came in, the fire department immediately was concerned about the panel, but then they say, well, it looks like your entire fire system is not up to code. We need to look at replacing your entire sprinkler systems. So we're going to end up probably in negotiation with the fire department about what else they're really talking about and whether we can negotiate out of some of the things they wanted to do.
I'm a little curious about that because that building was remodeled not all that long ago, and not in government time.
Yeah.
And,
Standards change, and
standards change.
So
But I do believe we had all of the permits, and that would have included sign-offs from the fire department. So if something is amiss, I'm curious what went wrong at that time. Because as I recall, when we upgraded and remodeled that building, we went through all the necessary steps. So if they're trying to put that on the table, maybe we could go take a look at what happened.
I think that's part of the deal, and as soon as they walk in, anything they see, like Catherine said, could be new codes. They want you to do all of that also. When you're just fixing a panel, they want you to fix everything, and they're going to present the costs, I think, at the next meeting.
We're familiar with regulators.
Yeah, and so that's not a done deal yet. We did vote to replace the Portola pump station, and then, as you know, we talked about the budgets.
So
I think other things were in closed session.
Okay, so that was pretty quick on an item that we've been working on for a long time. Can you tell me a little more about that?
They approved it. It was $18,000 for...
that was a change.
That was the change order to what was already in the budget. This was additional costs.
Okay.
So, moving on. And those were the big items.
Okay, Mid-Coast Community Council canceled its last meeting. It did, at the meeting prior to that, appoint Tamara, and I've forgotten her last name. I think she will be very successful. She's very serious about about being involved in government, and she lives in Moss Beach. So, moving on to back to another one, director's reports.
How about CSDA?
CSDA.
Let me do that one first.
Why don't you do that one?
I'll do that one before you cut me off.
I'm going from memory, so.
Okay.
Which is bad.
There have actually been 2 meetings. We had a special meeting of our special districts chapter. LAFCO was going to approve their budget, which we will contribute to, and I'll get to that next. There are several people who always complain about the budgets and why do we have a LAFCO? Let's just farm the whole thing out. So the president called a meeting of anybody who wants to come in and just had a special meeting about the budget. And I think there was a pretty good consensus that if we are required to do X number of reviews, you need X number of people to do it. So we took that That was the whole thing for the meeting. We also elected a vice president, which we didn't have at the time. Then moving on to the formal LAFCO meeting, they've had several things they do all the time, which is some of the districts have little outlying people in the unincorporated areas. Those people will request attachment because of either problems or septic system failures. So those have become more automatic. They are looking at a process with Redwood City, which Redwood City requires now that you be incorporated into the city before you apply to be hooked up to the sewer systems. We talked about the budget, which I mentioned. The budget was approved for LAFCO, and you may not know what our piece of that is. So of the total budget was like $460,000, let's say roughly. The LAFCO budget is split three ways. The county gets half, this third, the cities get a third, and the special districts get a third. So we, special districts, get a chunk of about $166,000. That's split between all, I think it's roughly 22 districts. It's split based on operational budgets or operations, and I don't know what our actual piece of that is, but we're pretty small.
We are paying both, we're paying twice. We're paying for sewer and we're paying for water, and it's roughly $2,500 on the sewer side and $4,500 on the water side. I don't know if Peter has the exact numbers here
Yeah,
right now, but that's roughly what we're paying.
So, and other districts pay huge amounts more than we do. We're
But
lucky in
it's a
some ways to be
percent
small.
It's a percent of the budget.
Yes, it's on your revenue and things like that. So,
Yeah.
that was pretty much it for LAFCO.
Good. So we're done with LAFCO for now,
For 2 months.
for 2 months. So that gives us attorney's report.
Nothing to report.
Okay, director's reports. Hearing none, general manager's report. Well, I see that it's attached, and one of my concerns has been that over the past while, I know there were supposed to have been meetings between the general manager at SAM and the other general managers, and that instead there have been just general managers meetings between the three sewer agencies, and I don't see that on this report. Did you have a meeting with the other, or a phone call with the other general managers from Granada and or Half Moon Bay?
I am not certain where you heard this and what you're talking about. We had a mediation session in January
No.
where the three managers attended. And that's for this current calendar year.
So you've had no other discussions with the other general managers?
Well, we had a SAM managers meeting, indeed, must have been sometime in February.
Okay.
Okay. But, yeah, I don't know what you're talking about. Where is this coming from?
Okay. These are the ones that I had asked if you could have either recordings or minutes or something when they were happening last year, and I had been told that one or more of the general managers would not stand for that. So I was just curious if those meetings or discussions were still ongoing.
So the SAM managers have met in irregular intervals, okay? I'm not aware of any requests for recordings. I'm aware of that there was a request to SAM for those meetings be recorded. I'm not aware of anything that was brought to me in regards to recording meetings, but I can tell you, these are simple staff meetings, and this is a normal communication that needs to happen. This is SAM is an integrative joint powers agency. I highlight joint. We're supposed to sit together on a regular basis. And so I would argue, if that comes to me, I've declined to be recorded at SAM, and I would decline to be recorded here as well.
We are being recorded. That aside, given the fact that we are in the midst of a lawsuit by one of those agencies, I have had for a long time deep concerns about general meetings that have no records.
Again,
And no way to know what is being said. But if any of those meetings happen, I request that they go on the manager's report.
they would go if we would have a scheduled managers meeting from SAM or without, of course, we see these.
Or even ad hoc.
I would agree. I'd like to hear a little bit more about that because it would help us with closed session discussions and so on.
But because this is just the manager's report, we can take it up next time, but please put them on.
Well, I think that there may be a distinction between the general management, so to speak, and the general managers of the member agencies meeting with the SAM manager, as opposed to the managers' meetings convened under the auspices of the mediator and as part of the mediation.
I agree.
Which is a litigation issue. I might comment that the notion of recording meetings, generally, we look at it from an evidentiary standpoint. When you start recording meetings, it's kind of an intimidating thing. And it can work to obstruct the free exchange of views because the people are concerned about are they going to have to be confronted with something they said at a given time. And it could be very adversarial.
Particularly in this day and age. But I had also asked just for minutes, even if they were just action minutes, just to know what had been discussed.
Minutes are a different thing because they tend to be a distillation of subject matter.
I understand.
Yeah.
But that also was rejected by the managers. So it has left me as a board member on 2 boards wondering what's being said, what's being discussed, and what the issues are. I'm being asked to make policy in a vacuum.
Explain the rejection. I'm not sure I understood that.
At a SAM board meeting, and actually in personal conversations with Clemens, I had asked for minutes to be made or kept, and then at the SAM board meeting, it was brought up. And Half Moon Bay, in fact, said no, they would not participate with anything if there was any kind of recording or any minutes. That's to my recollection. And
We have a problem.
we do have a we have a problem. And I just think that as board members, the more that we know about what's going on, we're asked to make big decisions about large amounts of money, and yet there's information missing. So just please on future managers' reports, please include those.
Sure.
Thank you. Okay. I think we're going into closed session. We're going to adjourn to closed session. So Dave, or Jim, you were asking about this.